Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in '06 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post 9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.
This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen. With Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC. It's just amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday afternoon. I brought this up to Colin. We did the 9 o'clock hour. You know, when you have the Monday holiday, it kind of throws you off for the rest of the week, because I was thinking all day yesterday was Monday. I was also thinking yesterday was May 31st for some reason, which is not. Today's May 31st. Tomorrow's June the 1st. Believe it or not, we're about to be halfway through the year. I enjoy having the Monday holiday off, but it throws the entire rest of the week out of whack.
Yeah, you're way off. The worst part of it is you can't remember maybe what sub of the week is at Firehouse Subs.
That is a big problem.
That's probably the worst part. But I'm surprised, Tyler, because you know, with your turkey bacon ranch, affinity, you should always know what day is Tuesday.
I feel like I should.
You were 0 for yesterday.
Yeah, I was all out of whack.
It is Wednesday, May 31st. It is 11:02 a.m.
See, I'm caught up now.
All
and
right,
maybe like June will kind of be the reset.
Yeah. Yesterday was definitely a Monday from a work standpoint. Got to go play outside a little bit on Sunday finally, because the rest of the weekend weather was extremely crummy. Extremely crummy.
You know, on Saturday I went out to grab some food and I put on a hoodie, and I was like,
yeah,
it's just going to be June next week. Why am I wearing a hoodie?
It's not right. Don't worry. In probably, I don't know, a couple weeks, we'll be saying, okay, let's go back to May. Let's go back to the weather. We'll take some rain. We'll take some overcast, 'cause it's gonna be blazing soon, I'm sure.
You know, Colin and I were talking about South Carolina having their Week 3 kickoff time announced against Georgia, which is going to be 3:30, the first game of SEC on CBS, and what's going to be their final year, 3:30 in Athens, the third week of September. Go ahead and start putting on your sunscreen and drinking your water now. It's going to be brutal. You're going to be wishing for a 60-degree May day at that point.
That is always, like, if you go back and you don't need a record book like in Columbia. Like, if you're like, okay, what was the hottest day of name a year? You don't need to know, like, the date. You just say, oh, Georgia week. Like, it's always the hottest.
Yeah.
Is it that way in Athens, too?
Pretty much.
South Carolina game's always the mark where it's the hottest?
Pretty much. So the first Georgia game I ever went to in Sanford Stadium, coincidentally, was the week after they played South Carolina here in 2014. That was a game that was delayed by weather and all sorts of stuff. But they played Troy, and that would have been week 3 of that season, right the same weekend that this game's going to fall on. And it was the noon kickoff. And, man, that sun does not go behind the scoreboard till about 5, 6 o'clock in the fall or in early fall, and I got a lot of sun and dumped several bottles of water over my head over the course of that game. It was a fun day, but very, very hot.
Dump the $10 bottle of water right over your head and
That's
waste
right.
it. Drink some, dump it over your head. Yeah, it would be interesting. That'd be a good content piece for us on Gamecock Central. Let's go back and I don't even know if we'd have to look it up. We could look up the temperatures on game day, but if you were to rank like what were the top 10 hottest games ever, Georgia would probably be like 5 of them. There was a coastal game several years ago. I don't remember which one it was, which year, but I just remember you would hear constantly over the PA system, Doctor Number 4 report, because
people passing out.
People were
the heat.
falling out. It was really bad. And the UNC game, I want to say that was would that have been 13, where they played UNC at home. And there was this big deal being made about Jadeveon Clowney, and a lot of the players looked tired. It was at least 900% humidity that day.
Oh,
that was one of the hottest days also.
And for those people that have never been on field level, it's even hotter down there. So you're hot in the stands. It's even hotter down at field level.
Yeah, you're all condensed down there. All the down in the kind of the bowl area. It's just all like it just gathers.
Let me ask you this question in reference to Carolina and Georgia at 3:30 on would that be September the 9th or no, the 17th? 16th.
Yep.
Okay. If that game were being played at noon on Jefferson Pilot Sports, that's worth at least 5 or 6 more degrees, right? Because Colin and I went into the nostalgia rabbit hole in the 9 o'clock hour about JP Sports.
Oh, man. This game's
always hot.
We love JP Sports, but this game is too good for JP Sports.
It is definitely too good for JP Sports, but if it was being played then, it's guaranteed to be even hotter just when you bring JP Sports to town.
It is. And it depends on where you are in the stadium and all that good stuff. But it'll be a hot game. But this one, Tyler, was actually good timing that you brought that game up. I don't know if you talked about this earlier with Colin, but that game actually listed by ESPN as one of the most intriguing September games to open the year.
Definitely.
For context, just to give the other ones, LSU, Florida State, I believe that one's in Orlando.
Yep, that's week 1.
That's week 1. That was one. Then you got Texas at Bama.
Week 2.
That'll be a good one. And then Ohio State, Notre Dame, which is week 4. Tennessee at Florida, week 3. Pitt at West Virginia, the backyard brawl. That's always an entertaining game.
Yeah, I'm glad they brought that back.
Southern Cal at Colorado. Now, in most years, there is zero, less than, no offense, Heath Klein, there is zero chance, and he would probably agree with me, that this game would be on the schedule. But why is it on there? Not on the schedule, on this list. It is because, of course, of the Deion Sanders effect.
But Colorado's going to get so many, like, primetime games because of, funny enough, primetime being their coach, just for the attention of it all. They could be, I don't know, 2-7 on the season. I guarantee you they'd get a night game in like November on ESPN.
Yeah. I mean, they just, it's so fascinating. I mean, you cannot look away regardless of what you think of it. Even a lot of the people who are going, well, I can't stand Deion Sanders, or, I don't like what he's done, or I don't like that they've had, 75 players enter and then come in and out of the transfer portal. You're probably going to watch, right? Because it is fascinating. Maybe you're just watching to root against them. Maybe you're watching because you're rooting for them, or just pure curiosity.
I go back to the quote from bowling legend Pete Weber: "Hate me or love me, you watched."
Yeah.
Exactly.
Who do you think you are? I am.
Exactly.
Maybe Deion Sanders will bust that out.
It's like, hey, you don't have to like me. You're going to pay attention to what I do, though.
It is a very interesting game, though, when you look at it, because we'll get into South Carolina, Georgia here in a minute. That was the other game that made the cut here on ESPN's list, the most interesting September games. But it's a fascinating game, right? Because you have Southern Cal, who has Caleb Williams, has Lincoln Riley. Southern Cal goes, 4-8? Then they're within about a win of the college football playoff under Lincoln Riley. Have the Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams, and you're facing off against Deion Sanders and his big personality and everything that they're going to bring. So fascinating. And I'll tell you, Colorado, their schedule, to really the entire season, but to open the year, their first game is at TCU.
Yep.
That's fascinating. Then you've got, here's one that is almost as interesting to me as the Southern Cal game. Colorado has Nebraska in week 2. So you have two guys who are about as polar opposite as they can get. You have Matt Rule, who is, probably bringing a literal lunch pail to the game and all these kind of things. And then you have Deion Sanders. That game actually in Boulder at Folsom Field, that one is, to me, every bit as intriguing as the one against Southern Cal.
So if you're a diehard Carolina fan and you don't like Deion Sanders and you did not like Marcus Satterfield as the offensive coordinator here, how do you view that game?
Oh, I think Gamecock fans are probably rooting for Deion in that one.
Probably.
Yeah. I definitely think so. Or you're just like watching and...
It's like, I'm just not going to watch that game.
Yeah, maybe you just boycott it.
Just hope they tie.
Yeah, you might have the one, the T-shirt. I just hope both teams have fun. I hope both teams lose.
Wear the NCAA hat. Rob Lowe wore to that NFL game.
Yeah, just the standard hat.
I'm rooting for everybody. Looping back around to Carolina and Georgia, though, I talked about this in the last hour. This is really intriguing to me because this is in the third week of the season. South Carolina's going to take on North Carolina week 1, play Furman in week 2. Georgia plays UT Martin and Ball State leading up to this game. You're not going to get a good sense of what this Georgia team is from those two games because they're most likely going to blow them out, pull their starters at halftime. They're not going to have to show any nuances of their offense with Bobo being their offensive coordinator. You're not going to get a very good idea of what Carson Beck, assuming he is still the starter when the season rolls around, is at quarterback. There's going to be so many unanswered questions about this Georgia team. They're going to be good, and they're going to reload at the positions they lost guys, but you're not going to have a lot of great tape on them after the first 2 weeks of the season.
No, you're not. I mean, and for South Carolina, you're going to be going... I don't think there's going to be any surprises schematically from Georgia, offensively or defensively, right? You're going to look back at what they've done under Todd Monken, and there's going to be some carryover there, right? Mike Bobo's had a long career. You know generally kind of what you're getting there, and you know what you're going to get defensively from Kirby Smart and his system. And really what you're going to get from this team just in general is you're just going to be overwhelmed with talent, right? I mean, they lost a lot. They lost Stetson Bennett. They've lost Jalen Carter and Keely Ringo and Chris Smith and some other guys, right? But they've recruited extremely well, and they have for years. They've really almost taken it, not almost, they've taken their recruiting to the next level even. Georgia, even when Mark Richt was there and they would, scuffle and have a quote-unquote bad season, win 9 games, something like that, they were still perennially recruiting in the top 15, the top 10, the top 5 nationally. So that part hasn't changed. It's actually gotten better. So tons of talent on this team, but Georgia will have some questions, right? And you're not going to answer those questions against UT Martin and Ball State. South Carolina, the week before they play Georgia, they do play Furman, right? But week 1, they play UNC. Yep. And that'll be, that will be a different look than what Georgia presents. UNC is not as complete a team as Georgia will be, but still, I think a fascinating game. This is one, Tyler, that I think Shane Beamer's going to have. He does a fantastic job of keeping his team focused on what's ahead, right? I think if there's a challenge to be had here, it's to not look ahead too much to this Georgia game being the first, SEC game. This is a game that I firmly believe some of the players on the roster have kind of circled, right?
Yeah.
So, you can think about it in terms of don't overlook that the week before when you're playing Furman. That's true, but even week 1 against UNC is a huge one. And so I think there will be a lot of off-season and preseason messaging from Shane Beamer to keep everyone on task. But I know that this is a game where, look, not that this is going to win or lose the game for South Carolina, but everybody in that building knows that the effort that they put forth last year in that game was simply not good enough. It was, that game was over when the ball was kicked off, basically. And sure, there was a lot there. There were injuries. Georgia ended up winning the national championship. South Carolina got down early. They just never recovered. but they know they need to put forth a better effort. And I think when you look, Tyler, in these first 3 weeks for South Carolina, they're going to have a couple huge tests, starting with UNC and then to Georgia. And that's really going to kind of set the tone for them for the rest of the season, I think. The thing that Shane Beamer has done so well at South Carolina is he's been able to rebound his team from having some tough moments, right? You think about how they started last season, rebounded, fell off again. You think about the Missouri game. You think about the terrible Florida performance, but then they're able to unexpectedly rebound and play like how they did against Tennessee, how they did against Clemson, and win those games. So I think if there's one thing this coaching staff, Coach Beamer, is going to point to this year, it's let's be more consistent. Let's not be so up and down. And so certainly I think the way you think of it is week 1 against UNC, go win that game. But then you're circling this Georgia game as everybody knows that's going to be one of the toughest games, if not the toughest game on the schedule, especially being in Athens. But go out and put forth a competitive performance in that game. And so I think a lot of excitement on the part of Gamecock fans, too, for this one.
Right, and again, that Week 3 game against Georgia will kick off at 3:30 on CBS, the first SEC on CBS game of the season, and what is the final season of the SEC on CBS package. Come back on the other side. It's a very important week for the Gamecocks, not only from a baseball standpoint, but also from a recruiting standpoint as well. Talk about it next on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
Yeah, you heard me talk earlier about what day it is, and you can really set your clock or look at your calendar. Just write in the sub of the day for each day for Firehouse Subs. Today is the New York Steamer. It's right now it's Wes Mitchell's number 1, actually. So Wes is not with us today. He's probably listening, and I'm making his stomach growl now talking about the New York Steamer. It is absolutely outstanding. If you've never had pastrami, you've never had corned beef, go check it out. Even if you have, you probably haven't had it quite like this. The New York Steamer, it's the sub of the day at all 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs locations. That's $7.99 for a medium, $5.99 for a small, and there's a sub of the day every single day of the week. Today is the New York Steamer, $7.99 for a medium. You can go to firehousesubs.com, order with the Rapid Rescue, or download the Firehouse Subs app. Start earning yourself some rewards on your Firehouse Subs purchases. That's the New York Steamer, the sub of the day at Firehouse Subs.
All right, more on recruiting on the other side. You're listening to Gamecock Central Takeover Hour on 107.5 The Game.
Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in 2006 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post 9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head. On your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday morning. Very, very important week for Gamecock athletics. Obviously, you have the baseball team hosting the regional coming up on Friday. They'll take on Central Connecticut State at 7 o'clock. First pitch can be heard here on 107.5 The Game at 6:45. Campbell and NC State will play earlier on in that day at 1 o'clock game you can watch on the ACC network. But it's also a very, very important weekend from a recruiting standpoint, as you have a good amount of 2025 recruits coming into town on Friday as well.
Yeah, so the recruiting calendar is now flipping in a way to a key timeline. We've just now finished up, really today is kind of the official end of the what is called spring evaluation period. So you've got a timeline from mid-April to the end of May where assistant coaches, the head coach is not allowed per NCAA rules, can go out and visit high schools. You're not meeting with prospects face-to-face officially. That happens a lot, of course. But you're not meeting with them face-to-face. But what you're doing is gathering information seeing how guys have progressed during spring. You're taking in some spring practices. You're taking in some spring games in the month of May in South Carolina and some other places. And you're talking to high school coaches. And so you see a lot of new offers go out during this time. You see the board kind of reset. You see the pecking order maybe shift at certain spots. And that can be really 2024 and beyond. You know, we've seen some 2024 offers go out, but a lot of times it's 25, it's 26. Heck, we saw a rash of offers go out, 3 new quarterback offers in the 2025 class, a couple of new offers in the 2026 class that Dowell Loggins sent out. So that portion of the recruiting calendar is now ending. And now what we're going into in recruiting, beginning really this week, is another time where prospects are going to start visiting campus again in camps. So South Carolina's first camp, Shane Beamer football camp, first session is on Friday, starts at 10:30 in the morning. And so you're going to see a lot of prospects from all over the place, starting in South Carolina, extending outwards. They're going to be visiting campus to participate in camp, so they'll work out. A lot of guys that work out are just there, you know, for the experience, to learn more, to work out. There will be some targets during these 10 or so camp days that are spread out throughout the month of June that are legitimate guys for South Carolina, either guys they've already offered that they want to just work with one-on-one, kind of continue building that relationship, or some guys that have a chance, frankly, to earn an offer. We see that a lot in camps over the years. Nicky Minori, you know, is a great example of somebody who camped the summer, I think going into his senior season, earned an offer after his camp workout. We've seen a ton of those over the years. So there's team passing camps, there's lineman camps, and there's also just kind of the individual camps where you see all different positions work out. So first one on Friday is just kind of a general camp, so it'll be for all positions. Really, Pete Limbo even has a specialist camp, which is always fascinating. So a lot of that going on. But beyond that, Tyler, official visits start. And Shane Beamer said, I believe that was at the Florence Welcome Home event, South Carolina taking a little bit of a different approach this year. Official visit weekends. Instead of having 2 kind of big ones in the month of June, they're actually having 3. So they're spreading it out a little bit more. That'll kind of keep the groups a little bit smaller, give them a little bit more attention. The one at the end of the month is where they're bringing in really all the commitments and then some other big targets like Dylan Stewart. Still some important guys, though, coming in this weekend. You look at, there's a handful of them. Braylon Russell, running back from Arkansas. Jalewis Solomon, who's a talented athlete. South Carolina's recruiting him as a defensive back, coming in from Georgia. Parker Livingstone, who's a wide receiver from Texas. Denaz White, defensive lineman from North Carolina. And then Kaj Sanders and Chasen Johnson, 2 more defensive back targets out of New Jersey and Florida, respectively.
Right. You also mentioned Dylan Stewart coming in at the end of the month, said kind of breaking up into 3 different weekends over the course of the month, and he would be coming in with guys that are already committed, and obviously being the 5-star edge prospect from the DMV. How important is it for him to get in here with guys that are already committed to the program?
Yeah, I think that's going to be pretty important. I think there is some strategy to that, right? Dylan Stewart has actually, to back up a little bit, he has actually changed his commitment timeline a little bit. It was originally kind of, hey, whenever I'm ready, maybe before my senior season, because he's been a pretty prolific visitor. He's coast to coast. I mean, he's been out to Washington, to go take a visit, and he's also been all up and down the East Coast from, up north down to Miami. And been to South Carolina, 6 to 8 times. He's visited South Carolina more than any other program. But he did tell On 3 yesterday, told Chad Simmons from On 3, that he's now looking at maybe deciding in December. So if you're South Carolina, you knew the race would intensify. But now it has intensified even further in my mind, because not only do you have to hold off a bunch of programs, you maybe have to hold them off for even longer. He's named South Carolina as his public leader before. He hasn't done that lately just because he hasn't really named a leader at all.
Right.
But I think it's critical. Right now on the schedule, South Carolina gets the last swing as far as an official visit. Will that be his last visit just generally? I kind of doubt that, because if you visit somewhere June 23rd, I have a hard time believing that Dylan Stewart won't visit any campus, whether it's South Carolina or anywhere else, for months.
Right.
If he keeps at that December timeline. So he may add an official to Tennessee. He may add one to, there's a bunch of schools, still vying for one. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, to have Dante Reno and, Cam Pringle and a bunch of other guys that are all committed in this class, all on campus to kind of continue growing those bonds, I think that helps a lot. Nicholas Harbor will be on campus, I believe, by that point. So he'll be able to be there. And there'll be some familiarity that Dylan Stewart will have with some guys, whether it's freshmen that are already on the team, Desnu Miazulu, who's from that area, whether it's him, whether it's some other guys that are visiting. I think that's important. Anytime you can get a guy of his caliber back on campus for another visit, I think it's important. It'll come at an opportune time because it'll be towards the end of the month. Right now, the last visit in his official visit rotation, he has 4 of them right now. So, yeah, it's certainly a storyline to watch. I mean, Dylan Stewart, according to On3, the number 1 edge prospect in the country, a 5-star, and actually the number 1 overall prospect in the country, right? Yep. So I think it's almost been understated how big this could be if South Carolina could land someone of his caliber.
Right. And you have a very good write-up up right now on GamecockCentral.com about the latest on everything going on with Dylan Stewart as well.
Yeah, another interesting quote that he had. We actually had a couple pieces on him yesterday and mentioned how he talked with On3's Chad Simmons yesterday. He said that South Carolina was doing the best job recruiting him right now. So Sterling Lucas has done a fantastic job. Shane Beamer, the rest of the staff. Lucas has been a rock star in recruiting, had never done it before since he got to South Carolina, and he's really, really hit the ground running and done a fantastic job with Stewart and his family. So again, it's going to be a long ride. It's going to be a longer ride than we probably even expected with Stewart if he does hold to that timeline. But South Carolina doing a really good job amongst some blue bloods. I mean, this is somebody who's going to Georgia this weekend. He just went to Tennessee. Ohio State's in the mix. Alabama's in the mix, Oregon, Miami. It's kind of a who's who of programs that have been elite lately or historically, doing a really good job on the NIL front or all of the above, right? And so South Carolina right in the mix with Dylan Stewart.
Right. And we'll continue to keep you updated as that goes along. On the other side of the break, we heard from some coaches at the SEC meetings yesterday. We'll react to what they had to say. On the other side, you're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
Hey, if you're a small business owner here in the Midlands, think about everything you need to help your business succeed. You obviously need steady cash flow. You need happy customers. You need an overall plan, but you also need an insurance agent that gets you. So I have a recommendation for you, somebody to turn to. State Farm agent Amy Mason Cup. She actually runs a small business here in the Midlands too, and so she understands the unique needs that you have as a local business owner. Amy Mason Cup and her team will make it easy to choose the right protection for your business at the right price, because one thing you don't need is insurance stress. My family turned to Amy for our own personal, not business, but personal insurance. If you have questions about a policy other than business, you can turn to her. Auto, home, renters, boat, anything of that nature. But for business owners, you can turn to Amy Mason Cup too. Her team's experienced, knowledgeable, responsive, and helpful. Phone number 803-772-5554. You can visit her website to learn more, amymasoncup.com. She's a South Carolina native, local agent, local business owner who can help you with your local business insurance. Again, that's amymasoncup.com, 803-772-5554. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Eli Drinkwitz raised some eyebrows with a comment yesterday. We'll give you the full context on the other side. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs.
Hey, it's Chris Mitchell. After 10 years with no dog, we got Walter. I bring him to work with me a couple days a week, but on the days when he's not here, he goes to Ridgeside Canine for puppy daycare. Walter absolutely loves it there, and I know he's in great hands. Clean, spacious, happy. We even see pictures on Facebook of what he's up to. I love that you can have him train your dog while your dog's with him. I can't recommend them enough. Ridgeside Canine Training Facility and Aquatic Center on Gateway Drive in Winchester. That's RidgesideCanineWinchester.com.
107.5 The Game.
Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler Head and Chris Clark along with you on this Wednesday, second full day of the SEC meetings going on down there in Destin, Florida. The hot button issue obviously revolving around what the SEC is going to do as far as schedules go in 2024. Seems that it's likely going to be an 8-game schedule, but hopefully we'll get official word on that sometime this week. But a lot of things being discussed. And yesterday, a handful of the coaches did speak to the media, Greg Sankey as well. And one particular quote that got some mileage on Twitter yesterday was Eli Drinkwitz talking to the media. And I will admit, this was the quote that people are focusing on was a part of a larger question that he was answering. But everybody's talking about what he said about his brother-in-law being a pediatrician, not making the same money some of these college athletes are making, which that in of itself is funny. And everybody's, talking about, well, Eli, you make $6 million a year and you just coach football. That's the pot calling the kettle black, I guess. But the question he was answering when that came up revolved around gambling in college athletics. And we know that's a problem right now. The deal at Alabama with Bohannon, the deal going on in Iowa with 40-some-odd athletes there. I want to let you listen, if you haven't already, to the full answer that Eli Drinkwitz gave and kind of where he's going with this. And we'll talk about it on the other side. Again, Eli Drinkwitz yesterday at SEC Media Days.
There's just not enough. I mean, we're trying to give... Actually, Deion Sanders had a really good quote the other day talking about young men are joining a business, but we want to treat them like kids. We're giving guys 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old life-changing money. People are making more money in NIL than my brother-in-law, who's a pediatrician who saves lives. And we kind of do it cavalier, and we think that there's not going to be any side effects or there's not going to be issues. I mean, there's information out there. There's bad actors out there always trying to make a dollar. They're involved in running around campuses trying to gather information. Like I think it's probably going to become one of the key issues that we face in our locker rooms. I mean, the NFL's faced it more high profile than I've seen it in the last 15 years, in the recent 2 years. So I think it's more prevalent because there's more money involved, and everybody's looking for a quick way to make a dollar. And so, I've been known to play blackjack myself. So, it's a tough deal. And like I said, these young men are getting a lot of money that is a lot right now. And there's not, other than trying to hand out advice and provide some parameters to it. We talk about in recruiting, you recruit your own problems. With this NIL situation, we've created our own problems in college sports.
Now, if he had a chance to re-answer that question, I'm sure he leaves out the part about his brother-in-law, because, again, that's what everybody's talking about. But what he's talking about there is a larger issue in college sports, and this is, kind of come about from the NIL getting passed 2 years ago in 2021, and now I think 38-some-odd states have legalized gambling to some degree, and it's so easy to access. Obviously, you can just get on your phone and jump on DraftKings or whatever. You have these college athletes seeing more money than they've ever seen with their lives and not knowing how to handle it responsibly. And unfortunately, some of them have taken to gambling thinking that they're not going to get caught.
Yeah, I think Drinkwitz's answer, and it is, I'm glad you played the entire context of the clip, because I think if you can read, you need to have read the entire context. Now, yes, I said something about Drinkwitz on Twitter, which I agree with.
We all did, because they only provided us that little bit until later on in the day.
That part does still stand.
It does, and it's going to be funny next time they see each other at Christmas or whatever, like, hey, thanks, Eli.
Yeah, I mean, that part still stands. The part, I think what Drinkwitz said, there was a mix, and even hearing him talk about it, I feel like is a little bit different than even just reading the full context of it. It was a mix to me of some good points and some bad points, actually. Kind of the first reaction to it is, how do we get down the rabbit hole of talking about NIL and kind of almost this complaint about how players are making X amount of money now comparing it to your brother-in-law who's a pediatrician when the question was about gambling. I think he made a fair point if you are making that link, right? Hey, I think the point he was trying to make, Tyler, is that if players now have more disposable income, they may be more tempted to participate in sports betting, right?
Yeah, right.
Now, they may be tempted to do all sorts of other things. They may be tempted to buy a car that they shouldn't buy, right? Maybe some of them will be, how about this horror? They'll be tempted to actually spend their time and money on charitable causes.
We've seen
a lot of that, right? Now, the coaches don't want to talk about that as much unless they think it's going to help them in recruiting or something. So we do see those things. I think that I and many others, it was not an original thought that I had, kind of put Drinkwitz on blast for the hypocrisy of pointing out that players are making money, some of them more than pediatricians, the vast majority not, but some.
Yes.
Because he makes millions of dollars utilizing the services of those players.
Yep.
Any coach...
He's not saving lives himself.
Yes. Any coach will tell you, hey, the ones worth their salt will say this is a player's game, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have good players, you're not going to earn that paycheck for very long. You're going to be earning a buyout, if you don't have really good players. So I think the parallel he was trying to draw there, that just kind of was not a great look, right? Now, the point about gambling and the point about, maybe needing some guardrails for NIL, those are things that I think we can talk about because, look, gambling in college sports, maybe it does become more prolific with NIL. Will there be some type of linkage to that? I don't really know if we'll see that. I mean, I was just reading a story from ESPN from 2017 where 5 Richmond baseball players got suspended for betting money on sporting events. You can go through, you see this years back. It's not something that NIL has created. Just because some guys are getting some money in their pocket doesn't necessarily make them more disposed to starting to gamble on sports events. Is it possible? I guess so.
Sure.
I just don't think that we're going to, see a lot of it. And the interesting thing to me is that I'm glad that if this is what Drinkwitz meant, I'm glad that he pointed out there were bad actors trying to make a dollar. If he meant some of the other people that are ancillary to NIL, I totally agree with that. And I'm glad he said it. I think that's what he meant. And that most people with the advent of NIL have been, the kids are going to do this and the kids are going to do that. In reality, the worst actors have been the adults in the room.
Yep.
Right? The NCAA, which has created this problem. Congress, which we're relying on Congress to save the day on NIL, which is a horrible idea. Agents, which I think Drinkwitz maybe is talking about, who are costing their kids opportunities, pointing them to bad opportunities, taking giant cuts of NIL deals. We've seen that sometimes, trying to line their own pockets. That has been much, much worse, in my view, from kind of following this thing than what the kids are doing. And yeah, 18, he used 18, 19, 22-year-olds making life-changing money. Yeah, guys, when they go to the NFL, make life-changing money. A guy from overseas who's drafted into the NBA, a guy who goes to college for 1 year and is a one-and-done that gets drafted into the NBA, they also get life-changing money. So I'm kind of confused always by why we're only talking about college kids that are making, like putting them in a college setting,
right,
somehow makes them different than a regular 18 or 22-year-old. Those problems are there. Yes, sure. They are younger. We all made dumb decisions. We still do. But when you're younger, you're more predisposed to making bad decisions, whether that's finances, life, whatever. But it doesn't just apply to college kids.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what Drinkwitz is saying here is a mix of kind of good and bad things. I mean, when you talk about NIL side effects, yes, there are going to be some. Some of it's going to be bad acting by adults. Some of it's going to be, yes, sometimes these kids are going to come into the money that they come into, and they're not going to make great decisions, right?
Right.
Maybe that helps them one day. But I just don't get this constant almost, and Drinkwitz says he's pro-NIL, and I believe him when he says that, but I just don't know how. I think where he got himself into trouble, and rightfully so, is kind of talking about, almost complaining about kids making NIL money when he was asked a question about gambling. I don't know if we have any type of linkage with that just yet.
Right. We'll react a little bit more to what was said yesterday at SEC Media Days on the other side, or SEC Meetings, sorry, on the other side, as Hugh Freeze spoke on tampering. We'll hear from him next. You're listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
So I'm just sitting in the studio during our breaks, and I'm looking at some inspiration photos from our friends at Integrated Media. Check out their Instagram page, their Facebook page, Integrated Media Columbia. If you just search for them, they have all sorts of awesome projects here. I was just telling somebody who's moving into town, he needed somebody to hook him up from an AV standpoint. They're looking to put in a security system. They need somebody to mount their TVs. They need great internet to make sure they have a great system all around their home so they don't get the dreaded buffering signal, so that they have enough bandwidth to be able to handle everything that they're going to do at their home. And of course, I pointed them to Michael and Nathan and our friends at Integrated Media. They can do anything at your home from an audio-visual standpoint, whether it's something as simple as mounting a TV or creating an entire smart home system for you where you can control all of your electronic and audio-visual devices, including your home security, from the touch of a button. They can also do some amazing outdoor options for you. Outdoor patios, if you want a man cave in your home inside, they can hook that up for you too. If you need some inspiration, again, Integrated Media Columbia on Instagram or on Facebook, or give them a call, 803-948-8327. The website is integratedmediainc.com. Again, that's Michael and Nathan, our friends at Integrated Media, integratedmediainc.com, 803-948-8327.
Hugh Freeze on tampering up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head. On your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. I had Chris Clark along with you for a few more minutes before handing things off to Jay and Terry for the halftime show. As I mentioned before the break, we heard a lot from SEC coaches yesterday on a wide range of topics that are being addressed in college football right now. One of them is tampering, and Hugh Freeze, the new coach of the Auburn Tigers, gave his take on what he'd like to see from tampering and what his thoughts on it are. Here's what he had to say yesterday out at the SEC meetings.
I would expect it to come up. I don't think my answer is yes, I do have my preference and answer. Is it doable in today's time? I would love to see it go back to, players not being able to transfer and be immediately eligible unless the coach leaves or is fired or they graduate. And I think that eliminates tampering. People are not going to come take players if they have to set out, unless it's one of those two reasons. I think they have a right to do that, but I don't think that will ever happen again. So outside of that, I don't know how you really stop some of the discussions that will take place. And they're happening. They happen a lot of different ways, and I don't know that it's always the school that starts it. And so it's going to be very difficult, I think, to eliminate that totally, unless you go back to some of the transfer, modifying them, which I don't think it'll ever go back to.
The sport. So we only have a couple minutes here. We can take a deeper dive into this tomorrow, but based on what Hugh Freeze said there, in the era that we live in of college sports in general with the transfer portal, you've kind of let the toothpaste out of the tube already, and it's very, very hard to rein that back in. We just may have to continue living this wild west of the transfer portal, and it's really kind of hard to put chains on it and rein it back in at this point, right?
Yeah, I think we can talk about, okay, how can you rein in tampering? And I pretty much agree wholeheartedly with what Hugh Freeze said there. You can have ideas of, I think this would curtail it, I think this would eliminate it, but you're giving options that are, you may think it's a good option, but it's an unrealistic option at this point. It's kind of like NIL, where you're talking about NIL last segment. For years and years, the NCAA stance was, No, you can't have a YouTube channel that makes $1. You can't sign a hat. You can't do anything that might make money that's not for the NCAA or for your institution directly. You can't do any of that. We're giving no ground. Well, when that flipped, it flipped in a big way. The floodgates opened. The dam burst. Whatever you want to say, whatever cliche you want to use. Now, after that, everybody being the NCAA, some administrators, some coaches, Congress now, everybody's putting forth all these ideas. Here's how we're going to fix it. This is what we're going to do. And even if they could agree on something like that, you're just not going to be able to go back in any big way. Maybe at some point we all are surprised and there's some kind of guardrails on NIL that actually make sense. I tend to think what's going to happen is some type of collective bargaining agreement where both sides agree and make some concessions to kind of rein things in. We might see that. But you're not going back completely. So it's the same thing, free transfer. Like it or not, players have more power now. They have power to monetize their name, image, likeness. They have the power to move around to schools. For years and years, we said, coaches, you can do whatever you want to do. Players, you're completely locked in. So, again, because of everybody's unwillingness to give an inch, when it flipped, boom, it flipped in a big way. So we're probably not going back to the days of you got to sit out a year. And so because of that, we're going to stay with tampering.
You bring up a good point about eventually having to come to a collective bargaining agreement. That in and of itself raises a whole lot of questions and presents some issues too. We will dive into that on tomorrow's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Halftime show with Jay and Terry coming up next on 107.5 The Game.
Hey, it's Chris Mitchell. After 10 years with no dog, we got Walter. I bring him to work with me a couple days a week, but on the days when he's not here, he goes to Ridgeside Canine for puppy daycare. Walter absolutely loves it there, and I know he's in great hands. Clean, spacious, happy. We even see pictures on Facebook of what he's up to. I love that you can have him train your dog while your dog's with him. I can't recommend them enough. Ridgeside Canine Training Facility and Aquatic Center on Gateway Drive in Winchester. That's RidgesideCanineWinchester.com.